Hi friends, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood and a beautiful day to be neighbors. I am coming live now to talk again about the meaning of neighbor love in our society in the face of the MAGA regime and ICE in particular. A couple days ago I shared a video about the meaning of neighbor love in our time. I'd like to continue that reflection today briefly with more of a focus on psychological warfare in high conflict contexts, which we are currently in. First, I'd like to say that neighbor love means passionate will and practical work for the mutual well-being of all of us. That's the meaning of neighbor love. And for me, as an ethicist who has just published a book on the meaning of neighbor love, I sometimes feel a kind of worry that when I talk about neighbor love, this could seem like a kind of fluffy, flowery thing that doesn't really have genuine power, that it seems kind of like an empty, trite, tired, old school morality. And what I'm observing in our time is that neighbor love is very much the opposite of that. It is what it has always been from the beginning, a revolutionary movement to abolish othering. And othering simply means seeing and treating others as unrelated or less than ourselves. The opposite of neighbor love is an ethic of separation and superiority that seeks to maintain the status quo of oppression or domination. Dr. King and others have called this a negative peace. A negative peace has the appearance of orderliness, of lawfulness, but what is taking place in this facade of order is the terror of our neighbors. It is the humiliation and degradation of those who have been marked as others, and it is the maintained consent of oppression by those who feel comfortable with the status quo. Jesus said, "You've heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, that you might be children of your Father in heaven." And here Jesus names unambiguously, explicitly, and beautifully how neighbor love is in fact the abolition of othering, and is this revolutionary movement to transform our basic attitudes and practices and policies in society. The enemy, the one that we feel authorized, legitimate to hate, is the ultimate other. And Jesus is teaching us to say that those that you see as most worthy of being separated from us or being inferior to us are in fact equal and precious value. And to be a child of God means to see and treat them with love. This is the teeth, this is the muscle, this is the nonviolent power of neighbor love. And what we're seeing in this time, I believe, friends, is the MAGA regime's terror of and hatred for the radical ethic of neighbor love. MAGA depends on the othering enemy energy of marking others as unrelated or less than ourselves, and as enemies that we have legitimacy or even Christian authorization to exclude, to attack, to disappear, to deport, to hate, and in some cases to kill. And for those of us who continue in the work of following Jesus, the call is clear: to love our neighbors as ourselves and to recognize our neighbors as everyone. And for those of us who follow Jesus, Jesus is explicit that the neighbors are especially those that we are most tempted to other. It's children, it's women, it's the Samaritans, those that we see as ethnic others, as religious heretics, as political enemies. Jesus says that if you want to follow him and if you want to walk the way to eternal life, to love your Samaritan neighbors as yourselves and to even be able to learn from them. So today, friends, I'm reminded of the president saying that he will not be attending the Super Bowl, and I've just watched the beautiful video of Lady Gaga singing Fred Rogers' magnificent old song, won't you be my neighbor? And it's clear why the president and his clique don't want the Super Bowl to be seen and valued, because this is a message that every other is our neighbor, and we are invited by our conscience, and for those who are believers in God, we're called by God to see every other as our neighbor and to live in a spirit of tenderness, in compassion, in justice, and radical love. And I'll share the link to Lady Gaga's video after I finish recording this video. But I'm refreshed and energized to be reminded that neighbor love is not some kind of tired, old school, boring religious ethic. This is, in fact, the most energizing, challenging, prophetic ethic for our time. And delightfully, it's an ethic that is rooted in softness and sweetness, but also the fierce buoyancy of hope that refuses to be swept into the othering energy of power. Now, friends, I wanted to comment briefly on the psychological warfare of othering in a time of high conflict. I have lived and worked in the Ethiopian Civil War, and as the war was escalating and we were getting ready to see the full outbreak of violent combat, what I saw was this. People were being attacked to say, what you see isn't real. You have some kind of delusional relationship with reality, where if you point out these patterns of othering, how people are being labeled as animals or as criminals or monsters or cancers or bloodsuckers, if you point this out, you have somehow lost your factual relationship with reality. And I'd like to remind you today, pay attention and trust what you see with your eyes. Trust what you see with your ears. Trust what you discern with your conscience. Do not allow this tactic of psychological warfare to make you question whether you are accurately perceiving reality when you see people being yanked out of their cars and their doors being broken down, and women with bloody faces who are in a chokehold by ice, or you see children out in the snow who have been separated from their parents, or you see people being shot and killed by federal agents who have not been aggressing or inciting violence. Pay attention to what you see and do not allow the gaslighters to make you feel paranoid or insecure about your capacity to sense and perceive what's happening. Another tactic of psychological warfare is to make you feel like you're a bad person, like you are somehow morally corrupt, or you have lost your connection with God. Again and again and again in these high conflict situations, what you will see is that people will say that you have lost your relationship with the Bible. They will say that you are disobeying God. They will say that you are disorderly, that you are against the law, that you hate the police, and that you should check your conscience and reread the Bible, and you should obey God. And if you do all of these things, you will basically end up simply being content with what's happening. And I would remind you, friends, that if you love God and if you read the Bible and if you care about the rule of law and democratic constitutional order, trust yourself and know that you are in a long tradition of prophets who have been told all of these things, that they are pessimistic, that they are rebellious, or that they are anarchic, or that they want to tear down and burn down society. That's not what we're doing. That's not who we are. We have a basic, sane, decent, grounded perception of what's taking place in our society, and as we seek to love our neighbors as ourselves, to walk humbly with God, to love mercy, to do justice, standing up, speaking out, and resisting nonviolently what we see taking place in our society is basic moral decency, it's spiritual sanity, and it's actually the way of joy that is leading us into the beloved community that Jesus and Dr. King and those who have come before us have called for. So first, resist that gaslighting psychological warfare that says you've lost touch with reality, you can't see facts as facts, you can't watch videos and perceive what's taking place in them. Resist that psychological tactic of war that says that you're a bad person, that you're immoral, that you don't know how to read the Bible, that you're somehow anti-God or anti-Jesus because you care about the safety of your neighbors, because you care about truthfulness, because you are actively opposed to and resisting the degradation and endangerment of our neighbors. Don't accept that. And another tactic of this psychological warfare that we see in our times of high conflict is to tell you that you are anti-patriotic, that you are a bad citizen, that you are against America, that you want to try to destroy your society, and that, you know, if America was just in flames and that people were rioting in your street, that you would somehow be feeling glee or happiness or some kind of triumph. Sorry, friends, I got a call there and my connection was interrupted. I'd like to remind us of the prophetic words of James Baldwin, who said that he loved his country more than any other, and for that fact, he insisted on the right to critique America because he wanted America to be a society of truth, justice, and freedom for all. If you are standing up, if you are speaking out, if you are actively acting for the welfare of your neighbors at this time, that is an act of true, authentic patriotism. Patriotism is not a blind devotion to your society where you accept injustice and the violation of the law out of some kind of name of loyalty. Patriotism is a commitment to the moral integrity of your society and holding it accountable to its highest ideals and legal order. In the case of the United States, that's the self-evident truth that all people are created equal by God for lives of life, just basic survival, liberty, basic freedom, and the pursuit of happiness, a quality of life that is flourishing and that is not buried underneath hyper-vigilance and the terror of being arrested and the arbitrariness of so-called law enforcement. So, friends, if you are being told by family members or by fellow members of your church or by fellow citizens that you are somehow anti-American and that you are anti-patriotic because you are standing for truth, justice, and freedom in this time, just please allow that to fall off your shoulders, to be shaken off, and to not let that poisonous thorn to get stuck in your consciousness. Today, what we see is a call to love our neighbors as ourselves, to recognize that every person is our neighbor, and to recognize that love is not some kind of fluffy, flowery feeling that maintains the status quo. Love is passionate will and practical work for our mutual well-being. And in this time where political power depends on the toxin of othering, neighbor love will be threatening to those who benefit from the status quo. And they will deploy these psychological tactics of high conflict in which they tell you, you can't trust your senses, you can't trust your basic spiritual discernment, and you must see yourself as some kind of agitator or insurrectionist, and you are unpatriotic. And friends, I would like to tell you that if you are standing up for your neighbors and their protection and their decency and dignity, you are in fact being faithful to your God. You're being faithful to your own God-given body and senses, and you're being faithful to your society and its highest, in fact, most basic ideals of citizenship. So today, friends, it is a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and let us continue being neighbors to one another. And as we do so, let us resist these gaslighting psychological tactics of conflict and just maintain our groundedness in the way of love today as we go about our work and as we discern our vocations of being prophetically engaged in a time where we are pushed to disengage or to be swept away in disinformation and becoming instruments of loyalty to misleadership that would have us ally ourselves with injustice. Let us resist this, not out of resentment, not out of spite, not out of any kind of sarcasm or negativity, but out of our basic, sane, decent, good old Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist or Sikh or atheist moral conscience to love our neighbors as ourselves. Many thanks, friends. I'm grateful for our solidarity and fellowship in this time, calling us to be awake and engaged and to live in love.